Okay, hello everybody. I think there are plenty of you in now, so we'll just get started. Good afternoon, my name is Sinead Lawton. I'm the Publications Coordinator with Barnardos, and I want to welcome you all to this event today on staff wellbeing in early learning and care. The event has been held as part of the AINTIS Adult Learning Festival, which is an annual nationwide event celebrating adult learning. And I think this is our 6th year to participate in the festival. And we decided to focus on staff wellbeing today for today's event because everyday kind of stress in the workplace is becoming more and more recognised, and more places are taking steps to address it. And I'm sure, like many of you, it can be very challenging. I can find it very challenging juggling work and family commitments and personal issues. And sometimes it can all just begin to feel a little bit too much, and you can find yourself getting overwhelmed or stressed out. And for those of us working directly with children and families, whether in early learning and care, as a childminder, or in school-age childcare, it's very rewarding and enjoyable work, but it also can be very emotionally demanding. And, you're taking on the stressors of other people, and there can be other issues such as our working conditions that are causing stress as well. And that's when you don't even add in all the terrible events going on and constantly reading the news, and a 2-year global pandemic. And it's a real kind of testament to all those working in the sector that services stayed open and continued to provide kind of such an essential service in very difficult circumstances. But I know it's had a real impact on the emotional well-being of a lot of managers and staff teams. And this is why we thought it would be really important to take the time to have today's event and think about how we can take care of ourselves and our mental health, and kind of address any stresses or anxieties in the workplace before they escalate. And, it's really important also to consider how you can take care of your team and take care of one another. And if you're a manager, how you can work to take care of and support your team. So we have a great panel of speakers today, and I know we're going to learn a lot from them. We are delighted to have Grainne McKenna as our keynote speaker today. Grainne is Assistant Professor at DCU, teaching on the Bachelor of Early Childhood Education and Care. She's a qualified developmental and educational psychologist, and she's also worked as a primary school teacher and has extensive experience working in the early childhood sector. So she knows a lot about how we can plan for healthy and happy workplace experiences. We have Sharon Byrne, the Barnardos Early Years Development Coordinator, and Sharon has over 25 years experience working in early education and school-age childcare, and she currently coordinates a range of supports for the sector. And Sharon's particularly interested in trauma-informed practice, and today we'll be giving some insight into the impact of stress on our well-being. We also today have Amy Dowd, who is the manager of Coonbury Childcare Centre in Roscommon, and she's been the manager there for 14 years. And today she's going to be talking about her experiences as manager in promoting a positive and supportive environment for her staff team. So at the end of the event today, I'll be giving you some information on where we can access resources that we have developed specifically for today on wellbeing and early learning and care, and also a reading list. If you are posting on social media, the hashtag for the event today is Barnardos ALF22. So Sharon, when she does her presentation, will put that up on her first slide so you can see it properly there. The last thing I'll say is before we move on to our speakers is that we are recording this event today, and we're going to be putting it up on our website in the next couple of days. So I should say that while you can see us and you can see whoever's presenting, we can't see you and nobody else can see you. And that is particularly relevant for what we're going to start off with today, because we're very happy to have Jenny Murphy, who's the National Wellbeing Coordinator with Barnardos, and she's going to lead us through a short wellbeing activity to give us a little bit of energy and also to calm us down with some movement and breathing. So nobody can see you. So we are going to, on the panel, turn off our cameras so we're not distracting you. And I'm going to hand over to Jenny now, and I encourage you all to join in. Okay.
Thanks so much, Sinead. Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Just as Sinead kind of described, we are all living with a serious amount of stress in our lives, and daily that impacts us. So it could be that we start throughout our day to start shallowly breathing, or our shoulders start to rise, and we're holding all that tension and stress in our bodies. So there could be many different ways that you've discovered how to release that stress and that tension. But some of the practices that I'm going to show you today are really ways of kind of energizing ourselves when we need that, balancing our bodies and calming our bodies. So these are called breath, body, mind practices. And I hope that you'll join in with me. Like Sinead said, nobody can see you. So just do it like nobody is watching. Hopefully you're in a space where that's okay. So I'd invite you to join in. I'm going to share some music. We're going to do some energizing, some balancing, and some calming practices. And just follow along with me if you can. So I'd invite you all to stand. We're going to do some tapping of the body. Feel the music for a second. Move your body in whatever way is comfortable. And let's start tapping on one side. Pick up your side. The collarbone. And the base of the neck. And one shoulder. And bend that arm. And back. The other shoulder. And down that arm. Back. And up that arm. On the belly. And then we're going to move down the leg. Sides of the leg. Moving down. Outside of the feet.
Like lightning.
Tops of the toes. Inside the feet. Inside the ankles. Up the legs. Inside the knees. Top of the legs. Turn around and just move it back. Take through. And up to the kidneys. And back to one side. Other side. And the collarbone. Just give it one more twirl. Lovely. Okay. Just come to stillness for a moment. Closing the eyes, arms down by the side, or gaze down, whatever's more comfortable. And just notice how your body feels after that practice. Okay, well done. So the next practice we're going to do is ha breath. So we're going to do 2 types of ha breath, and this is another energizing practice. So what we're going to do is stand about shoulder width apart. We're going to breathe in, and as we breathe out, we're going to say a deep ha sound from our bellies, okay? And I would just warn you, if anyone is pregnant or if they have had any recent surgery, just be a bit more gentle on yourself. Don't do such a forceful ha, okay? So again, standing shoulder width apart. The first ha breath we're going to do is hands just kind of loosely at your sides. As you breathe in, you're going to stretch your hands up into the air. And as you breathe out, you're going to drop your hands out and just say ha from the belly. Okay. We'll start. Let's just take a synchronizing breath together. Breathing in and sighing out. Okay, begin. Breathing in. Ha. 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 Last one, breathing in. Ha. Lovely. Arms down by the side. Close your eyes again or gaze down. And just notice any changes in your body. Okay, well done. The second hand breath we're going to do, we're going to touch two parts of the body. We're going to touch the base of the neck as we breathe in. And as we breathe out, we're just going to tap the tops of our legs. And that's where you say the ha breath, okay? So the breath in, you're going to touching the base of the neck. And the breath out is your ha, okay? Again, standing kind of shoulder width apart, and let's move together. Breathing in. Ha! 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 Breath in. Ha! Last one, breathing in. Ha! Great. Again, arms down by the side. Close your eyes or gaze down. And just notice how your body is feeling now. How are your thoughts? Okay, well done. The next breath and movement activity we're going to do is what's called sky and earth. So basically we're going to breathe to the count of 5 breaths per minute, breathing in for 4 and out for 4. We're going to gather some sky energy. We're going to bring it down to the earth. Then we're going to gather some earth energy and bring it up to the sky. With this movement, you're going to want to stand just a bit more than shoulder width apart, okay? And just follow along with me, it's pretty simple. We're going to first stand just with our palms facing our forehead, slight bend in the knee. And just standing here for a moment, just gathering some energy. We'll start to breathe together. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4. This time when we breathe in, we're going to stretch our arms up to the sky. And as we breathe out, bringing that energy down, we're going to spread that energy, hinging at the hips, flat back. Again, breathing in, up to the sky. And breathing out, down to the earth. Breathing in and up. And breathing out and down. Breathing in and up. And breathing out and down. Hinging at the hips, flat back. One more time, breathing in and up. And this time as you breathe out, just bring that energy ball that you've created just in front of your belly for a moment. And let's just breathe in and out here together. Breathing in, energy ball gets bigger. Breathing out, energy ball gets smaller. Breathing in. And breathing out. Let's just move our energy ball in small circles, just around our bodies. Breathing in as you come up, and breathing out as you come down. Breath in, breath out. Breath in, breath out. Let's just change our shape. We're going to move it to like an infinity sign or a line down 8. 2 kind of circles on each side. Breathing in on one side and breathing out on another. Breath in, breath out. Breath in, breath out. One more time, breathing in and breathing out. And bringing your energy ball back to your center. Let's just breathe in again here, making our ball bigger. And as we breathe out, just make that energy ball a little bit smaller in our hands, creating a pearl of light. And let's place that energy into our bodies, somewhere that we really need it most today. So into our belly for strength, for vitality, into our hearts for love and compassion, or into our minds for focused attention and clarity for the day. I'm going to put it into my heart today, because I think we need more love and compassion in the world. So closing your eyes or gazing down, just feel that energy being absorbed. Okay, well done. Okay, we're going to do one last breath and movement. So this was called painting the waterfall. So basically you're going to breathe in again for the count of 4 and out for the count of 4. And we're going to just do this gentle movement where we're floating our hands up and floating them back down. Imagining there's a waterfall in front of us and our fingers are just lightly touching it. Okay, we'll start. So again, shoulder width apart with the feet, and let's breathe in together. Breathing in. 2, 3, 4. Breathing out. 2, 3, 4. Breath in. Picturing that waterfall. Breath out. Trickling your hands. Breath in. It could have a color. Breath out. Breath in. Breath out. Last one, breathing in. And breathing out. One last time, just arms down by the side. Close your eyes or gaze down and go inside. Notice any changes in your body. Notice, is there any more space between your thoughts? Okay. I'm going to invite you just to sit down and we'll just do a very short body scan just to get us ready for the rest of the afternoon. So just find a comfortable position, feet flat on the floor. And if you feel comfortable, just close your eyes for a moment. Soften all the muscles at the top of your head. Soften the muscles between your eyebrows. Soften the muscles of your cheeks, of your jaw. Soften your shoulders. Soften the muscles starting at the top of your spine, moving all the way down to the base of your spine. Soften the muscles around your heart. Soften the muscles of your belly, of your upper legs, of your lower legs, Soften the muscles in your ankles, the tops of your feet, and your toes. Placing one hand now on your heart and one hand on your belly. Just notice your breath. Not trying to change it or do anything different. Just notice it coming in and coming out. And remember, you can come back to your breath at any stage in your day. It can be your anchor. I would invite you just to stretch a little bit now, just like you're a cat waking up from a nap. And just one last thing, give yourselves a lovely self-hug and thank yourselves and squeeze for joining in this practice today. Well done, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Jenny. That's really lovely. And I think that would be a really nice thing for staff teams to do, maybe at the start of the day or at the end of the day, to kind of just calm themselves before they move on to the next thing. As I say, that will be recorded, so you might even be able to just play Jenny's presentation or exercise there with your team. Jenny, also, could you maybe just put in the chat the name of the song that you had on at the start, because a few people were asking. Okay, well, that's all set us in the right mind frame. So I'm now going to hand over to Sharon, who is Barnardos Early Years Development Coordinator, and she's going to share with us a little bit about how stress can affect our bodies and make us more aware of how we feel when we're stressed. So I will hand over to you, Sharon.
Great, thanks, Sinead. I'm just going to pull up here. Now, are you okay? You seeing that there, Sinead?
Perfect.
Oh, brilliant.
Yes, I am. Thanks.
So, hello, everybody. As Sinead, I'm the Early Years Development Coordinator with Barnardos, and thanks so much, Jenny, because obviously when you're presenting at an event like this, it can be quite stressful. So it was absolutely lovely to have those few minutes to kind of just a little bit of unwind. So really enjoyed that. So thanks very much. So absolutely delighted with the event this afternoon. The well-being of professionals care is such an important topic. We know that when we're stressed, to the degree that it impacts on our physical and our mental well-being, then we're just not going to be able to be the supportive, caring, strong and kind adults that we want to be for the children in our lives. So for the next 10 minutes, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of what we mean by stress and burnout. But before I start, I just want to do a very quick word association game. So I'm going to say a word and I want you to have a picture in your mind. What comes to your mind when I say that word? So are you ready? Okay, the word is work. So what comes into your mind when you think of work? Now, some of you maybe thought about the children in your services, and hopefully that brought a little smile to your face. And some of you might have thought about the people that you work with, and you might have friends that you've made through work. But I wonder, did any of you feel like this? We know caring for young children is intensely emotional work, and it often comes with a very demanding workload. And as a workforce, early years educators are particularly susceptible to stress and burnout. Over the last few months, I've heard more than ever before, I've heard time and time again stories of educators and providers and managers feeling extremely stressed in their role. And we know there's a link between stress and performance. And some stress is good. It can motivate us to get things done. So I knew I had to have a presentation this afternoon. It's a little bit stressful, but it's a good stress because it kind of makes me make sure I'm organized and have everything ready. But where the problem can be is when stress moves from that kind of motivational piece to becoming distress. That's when problems appear. And when that situation is prolonged, it can lead to what we call burnout. So you can see here the definition on the screen. So when we say burnout, it's the emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion that results from exposure to long-term stressful work situations that involve emotional demands. And it usually begins quite gradually, and then it gets worse over time. So we really need to think before we get to the stage of burnout. It's that point before our stress turns into distress. We need to make sure we're accessing all of our stress management and well-being tools. And just like Jenny was demonstrating some of those tools earlier on, and we're going to hear later from Grainne and Amy, so I'm really looking forward to that. So stress can affect all aspects of our lives, emotionally, mentally, and physically. So in terms of our feelings, it can bring up feelings of anxiety, fearfulness. We can become very irritable. It can impact on our self-esteem. It can affect us cognitively. It can make it very hard to concentrate, to make decisions. It can even cause physical symptoms. So when you think, when you're that stressed, you can't sleep, you're feeling ill, you've got stress headaches, you've got a bellyache. It can impact on our behavior. So maybe when we're stressed, we might eat too much, or we might eat enough, or we might drink more alcohol or smoke more than we normally would. And then stress has a serious impact on the relationships that we have with our partners, our family, our friends, and all those important people in our lives. And the sources of stress, they're going to be different from person to person. And maybe we might have things going on in our own lives that are very stressful, or maybe the stress is coming from our professional lives and our workplaces, or sometimes we can have a combination of the two. So as if stress is not bad enough in terms of the impact we talked about on ourselves, also impacts on the quality of care that we provide as early years educators. When we're stressed and overwhelmed, what can happen as a kind of coping mechanism is that we can tend to withdraw emotionally from our work. And that has really serious impacts on relationships that we have with the children and the families that we care for. We know stress is contagious. So in terms of that teamwork, if we're working alongside workers that are stressed, and some of you probably had that experience, that can be an additional source of stress for us too. And for the setting as a whole, they've done loads of studies in terms of workplace stress and early education. And we know that it can cause increased absenteeism, and it can contribute to having a high turnover of staff. And all of those things, it contribute to and undermine the quality of care in a setting. So what's some of those signs of stresses? So what might we observe in ourselves or in our co-workers in terms of in an early learning and care setting, and how might we see that in our behaviours? So when we're feeling very stressed and feeling very overwhelmed, it can trigger what we call fight, flight, or freeze stress responses. So I'm sure some of you have already heard of fight, flight, and freeze. And if we're in that stress response, it can mean that it's very challenging to engage in problem solving and rational thought. We're going to have difficulties being able to regulate our own emotions and our own behaviour. So some of the signals that our stress response or those in our co-workers are activated. So you can see here on the table. So if we're really stressed and overwhelmed, and our fight stress response can get activated. And that might look like using very raised tones of voice and very stern tones of voice with children. We might be very directive and corrective. We might get into physically redirecting children. We might rush into situations without thinking first. We might be very short-tempered with children and with adults. If we have that flight stress response, what you might see is people ringing in sick to work a lot, people walking away from children who are having challenges in the setting. You might try and avoid problems with children, with your co-workers, with your supervisors or your managers, or you might be always making mistakes, making excuses and constantly leaving the room or leaving different tasks. And then if we're in a freeze stress response, what can happen is it can be very difficult to stay up in terms of all of our work that we have to do. It can mean that people shut down emotionally, and sometimes it's very hard to even think and speak if we're caught in that freeze stress response. And you might have seen this with some people that you have said that are very stressed. Maybe they're going through the motions of the day, but they're not really tuned into what's happening in terms of the children and their co-workers. And then also you might see people who tend to isolate themselves in work when we're very stressed. So not really looking good, quite serious stress responses we're seeing there. And that's all in relation, we were talking there about burnout. And burnout isn't exclusive to the care and professions. You could be working in any workplace and to be exposed and have burnout as a result of stress. But what the difference is when we're early years educators and we're in that care and profession is that we can be exposed to additional stresses that caring for children and families who've experienced trauma or experienced extreme adversity can bring. So this, I'm thinking of all the children and families that we're getting ready to welcome into Ireland from the Ukraine. Can you only imagine the trauma that those children and families have been through? And just in terms of taking on board all of those stresses that we might be indirectly impacted by, I just really love this quote. I think Rachel Remen says it all here. And she says, the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to walk through water without getting wet. So early years educators who work with traumatized children are at risk of being indirectly traumatized as a result of maybe hearing about children's trauma or witnessing its negative results. So what we call that is secondary traumatic stress. And that refers to the behaviors and emotions that can arise when we work with traumatized people. And I know from, we're in touch with a lot of early year services. So I know many of you might be engaging in child protection work. You might be supporting children who've been impacted by trauma. So when we're talking about secondary traumatic stress, we do mean that impact that the indirect exposure to that trauma has on us as professionals. So it's specifically thinking about the cost of caring and how it can reduce our ability to empathise with others, and it can take a real toll on our physical and mental health. But I don't want to leave you feeling drained and feeling down. Like, there is loads of good news. There's so many different steps that we can take to both minimize and buffer the impact of stress. So we're trying to prevent burnout, we're trying to prevent secondary traumatic stress, and we're really trying to promote well-being. So on the good side, some of you might not have heard this term before, and some of you maybe did. Compassion satisfaction. So that means there's positive aspects of caring and that occur, and they kind of counterbalance that stress. So it's the sense of pleasure and fulfillment that we get from working in caregiving professions. So you might feel really positive and really proud of the work that you do in your setting and the work that you and your team do in the setting. This balances out those negative costs of caring and can have loads of benefits, including facilitating positive opportunities for growth, gives us a depth of meaning in our lives, increases our self-esteem. So we can try and hold on to that more optimistic compassion satisfaction. And when we promote well-being among our staff, we should be doing it anyway. It's a humane thing to do, but it also has loads of positives and benefits in terms of the setting. It's such big benefits and positive impacts on children, including being able to have stronger relationships with children. People that work in our settings are going to feel more valued, supported, and invested in, which means that we can do our job better. It reduces absences from work in relation to people maybe being sick as a result of stress, and people being able to manage that stress better and develop healthier coping strategies. And lastly, it's when we promote staff well-being in their settings, it improves job satisfaction, which can also in turn support retention. So that's kind of me finished. I'm really looking forward to hearing Grainne talking and Amy talk. And so that was really just a very quick whistle-stop tour in terms of stress and burnout. So thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Sharon. It's great to kind of be made more aware of some of the signs of stress and the impact it can have on our work. Now we're running a wee bit behind, so I'll not keep you any longer. I'm going to pass over now to Grainne McKenna, who is our keynote speaker today, and I'm very interested in what she has to say. So over to you, Grainne.
Hello everyone, just getting my screen set up nicely for you here. There we go. Now, is that looking nice and clear? Sharon, you give me a nod. Hello everyone, it's lovely to see your names, unfortunately not your faces, but hopefully we will all see each other again in person soon. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about wellbeing, strength and support for early childhood educators. But I suppose before we start, it has to come with a health warning, because I'm not here to tell you how to lead your best life or show you about strategies for your own well-being. This is very much about this adult learning experience. So it's Adult Week, and I'm going to be in the lovely position of sharing the ideas of what the science is telling us about well-being within early childhood care and education. So thank you to Jenny for the lovely breathing, but I'm not the best person to, I suppose, talk about well-being. Like everyone else that works within the sector, I often overextend myself. I take on too much. I can be very much of a yes person. And these are characteristics which are very much common within the sector, and they do deplete our well-being. So let's have a little think just about the current state of affairs in terms of overall well-being and what the impact on COVID-19 has been on the population more generally. Well, there's been some nice work carried out in Ireland, both by Trinity and Maynooth University, that have really looked at what Sharon talked about, these feelings of psychological distress. And that's arisen from the general fear associated with getting sick, but also the significant restrictions that have been placed upon the population, and also demands of work. And when I talk about demands of work, I'm particularly looking at early childhood care and education in terms of the essential service that it is. And I'm not talking about workforce activation here. I'm not talking about you are essential so that parents can get on with their work. I'm talking about you are essential to children. What the current research about children's outcomes from COVID-19 is telling us is that when they were not in their early childhood settings, that we're seeing dips in language, we're seeing dips in well-being, we're seeing children experiencing more difficulties with transitions because they weren't with you. Your work is so important as essential workers to the children, not as a labour activation method, which is often, I suppose, the bigger story that we hear about in the media. So in terms of well-being, what we do see is increased rates of psychological distress among the population more generally, and risk factors include being female. So I'm sure that accounts for almost all of you there. A quick look at participants, but welcome men in childcare too. So being female puts us at risk of psychological distress as a result of COVID, as does working in a caring role, as does living alone. So they were sort of three key areas of concern. And then when we look more specifically at what was happening for early childhood educators, there's been some really interesting work done in this internationally, not that much in Ireland so far, #collaboration, if anyone's interested. But the challenges that we're seeing for early childhood educators are things like long working hours and low salaries. And interestingly, this study, which I think I mentioned was Australian, it's not saying that these are directly linked to COVID-19. We always experience these challenges, but they have been illuminated and exacerbated by and within the pandemic. So the experiences that we're seeing that impact on well-being of early childhood educators relate to long working hours and low salaries, so insufficient remuneration for the effort and the energy that we put in. Overwhelming workloads. And interestingly, when people talk about the workloads being overwhelming in the literature more generally, it's really interesting because children rarely come up. The interactions with the children don't seem to be the piece that makes it overwhelming. It's the paperwork. It's the working with others. It's communicating with the outside agencies, so the social workers, the psychologists, the speech and language therapists, the administration workload of returning fees and fundings and forms, okay? So that's what people talk about in terms of being overwhelmed. It's rarely these everyday interactions and learning experiences with the children. The other challenge relates to an idea of unsupportive management. We'll draw that out a little bit more as we go on. This idea of autonomy comes up as really significant to well-being. And when we talk about autonomy, what we mean by that is, I have control of this. I know what I'm doing. I'm good at my job. I'm independent. Another factor, I suppose, is stressful encounters with colleagues or parents. And I think I would definitely identify with that myself. And in particular, and again, it comes up later in the presentation, this interface between parents can actually generate significant worry, concern, and impact well-being. And actually, I don't know that we're talking about it enough within an Irish context. So what are those interactions with parents and how do we promote the positive? So are parents regularly telling you, either through their non-verbal communication or how they respond to you, do you feel valued by parents in the work that you're doing at drop-offs, at collections? What mechanism is there for them to tell you how important the service that you offer their children is? Children's challenging behaviour does come up as a stressor, and again, this is an area, if you have a look at this Edie paper, she talks a lot about how that's been illuminated by COVID, and some of you will be seeing that. So where behaviours are more challenging as a result of the multiple transitions and the unpredictability that COVID-19 created. And then the other piece, I suppose, that impacts our wellbeing is professional identity. Australia would be quite similar to Ireland in that they would have had a number of initiatives about workforce development, curriculum development, and many, many asks upon the workforce. And those multiple asks often come with that discrete suggestion that we're not doing it already, or that we're not trying our best. And that can really exacerbate people's feelings of being ineffective or not good enough, and it impacts on our well-being. So again, all of these factors appear to be exacerbated within this bigger macro system of societal beliefs. So one of my big memories, you know, in the life before COVID was actually like a significant event before COVID was the day of the march, you know, so that was like in, was that 2019, 2020. So when we all gathered together just off Marion Square, that was like one of the last big things, I suppose, that I was at with a lot of people. And it was one of the first times that I really did feel that society was recognizing the importance and the value of our work. But it is a factor when we hear wider discourses. And I was aware of doing this session today, you know, on well-being in early childhood. Read the room, Grainne. We've just had announcements about funding streams that have left many, many providers feeling extremely dejected. You know, we have discussions about minimum pay rates. Do we really need graduates? You know, these are actual discussions that people are having. And yes, the answer is we do need graduates. We need all sorts. But you know, there is wider discussions within society that generally impact on the well-being of those working within it. And when I was thinking about this paper and the work of Edie and others like her, it really did, it had a whiff of Brofenbrenner off it. And I was thinking about the fact that as early childhood educators or as individuals working in the sector, we can do as many mindfulness classes or stretches or well-being activities as we want to increase our personal well-being. But until the wider system supports and values the well-being of early childhood educators and the important influence that our well-being has on the children that we work with, well, then we're on a road to nowhere. Okay, so it's just me paying, €90 a month for yoga or whatever it might be. Okay, so we're thinking about, yes, we're important. So we are important in terms of our own personal well-being, but actually we sit within a wider system. And that's not just me saying that. There's lots of people who are way smarter than me and way better read. And that's generally the ideas that are emerging from the literature. So we're going to talk a little bit now about personal beliefs. So I am going to ask you to look into yourself. Okay, I'm going to ask you to think about your personal beliefs, but then we're also going to think about those proximal processes. Okay, do we quiz? What I mean by that is our relationships. Okay, so how are we engaging with one another within the workplace, with children, with parents, with wider structures? And then we might have some managers and leaders here today, and I can actually see some of you in the participants. So I'm also going to ask our leaders and our managers at all levels of early childhood to think about how we can support those wider structures that enhance well-being. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience engagement, if that's okay. And you can either do it in the chat box or some people love to remain anonymous, which is fine with me as well. So what I want you to think about, and maybe just give one or two examples, are the skills and attributes that make you really good at your job. So you can either use the chat box or you can use Menti, and some people like Menti because it's anonymous. So if you haven't used it before, what you do is you log on to menti.com, you find that, and you enter in that magic code, and then just pop in your characteristics, your skills, your attributes that you believe make you really good at the job that you do. Okay. So I'm just going to have a look and see, have we got some excellent levels of engagement? No doubt. Oh, here we go. Gorgeous. Oh, and you come in. They're not just single answers either. This is wonderful. So I'll call out a few of them as they're coming in. We've got leadership, really good communication. I'm a good listener. I'm patient. There's someone who's compassionate and loving. That's a big bit. We talk about this sort of pedagogical love. That's a big theme at the minute. It's always been there. Lots of patience, lots of fun. That's good. I love the fun ones. I'm very caring. I'm very empathetic. That's wonderful. Compassion. Okay. Thank you so much for your engagement, because actually it is really hard talking to a screen. I talk to myself frequently, actually, but this is maybe more than normal. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I'll share the Menti screen at the very end, and thank you for sharing in the chat box. And I suppose the point that we're all making and the themes that come up, I'm so glad that you agreed and came along on the journey with me. These are the key themes that come up again and again when we ask early childhood educators, what are the things that make you good at your job? And they're quite different from the themes that will come up in other roles and other jobs. There was actually a really interesting article this week, I won't go into it, in the BPS, so that's the British Psychological Society, about people's level of satisfaction with their jobs and their level of personal buy-in to it. And as the salary goes up, people's sort of personal satisfaction and the expression of their values is less, but they get more money. So at least we're happy and you know, per. So sorry, but so actually this idea that our characteristics and our values are embedded in our work, this is what we see in early childhood education, and all of these are very common. So we see things about love of children, concepts of resilience, that we're quite resilient, we're caring and we're compassionate. I must add patient to this list because it came up lots with this gang, and a willingness to take on many challenges, and as evidenced by your participation here today, the ongoing commitment to continuous professional development. I've noticed that all the time that I've worked in early childhood, that I am always astounded by how committed early childhood educators are to showing up and taking part in further education. So thank you for that. But on that, as wonderful as all of those traits are, they are also the traits that are our biggest vulnerability. Okay, so things like patience, things like being caring, they are hardwired into all of you. I don't doubt that. But in terms of your well-being, they are your greatest vulnerability. I have no doubt that I am talking to, it's almost hundreds of you at this point, you are the people who take on additional responsibilities, not only within your work, but within your family. You're the go-to. You're the person that takes on extra caring responsibilities. You're the person that finds it difficult to say no. So if you have sacrificed time or money, or if you have given up activities or events for the sake of the children in your care, then it is time to really consider in what ways can I give of all of these values, but not take away from myself, because that is really, really important for those working in early childhood education. That Edie's paper, the Patricia Edie's paper that I talked about, is a classic example. If I was to summarize it, it's a classic example of Irish early childhood educators, because if you want to know what that paper says without reading it, it says to early childhood educators, how did you get on in the pandemic? And the response that they gave was, sure, we're grand. It was very much that they acknowledged all the challenge of it and everything that they had to give, but they said, oh, we're grand. And essentially, that's what we tend to do. But we do need to think about what are the times when we can limit that love, limit that patience, and give it back to ourselves. Okay, so I mentioned we're going to have a little look at wider systems, and I'm going to start really thinking about our personal beliefs and characteristics. And sorry, I'm not thinking about these. These come from the literature and the science. I want you to think about in terms of your own characteristics. We know that those who have good well-being within their work in early childhood, we see common features. One is that they have an intrinsic, a built-in belief in the importance of their work. And if you don't have that, you probably won't last that long, okay? So it's important that you take a minute to sit with the importance of your work, the importance that you offer to children, okay? And I mentioned about what happened when you weren't there for children in the pandemic. I also want you to think about, even though you're not necessarily remunerated for it, I want you to think about and sit with your influence on the long-term trajectory for children's education. The books that you read, the conversations that you have, the learning experiences that you make interesting are the footprints and for all future learning through the educational trajectory. That's a really important job. Okay, and you should recognize and see that importance. And then there's also a piece about your importance to society. So I mentioned the fact that we are not just about labor activation, but you do need to recognize, and I feel it every day whenever I drop my son to the childminder, I know I would not be able to go to work and do the things that I do if I didn't trust her and trust that she cares for and supports the baby. Okay, so you do make a very important contribution to families and to mothers. I don't know if anybody saw, there was a brilliant thing on Twitter and it was like a picture or whatever, and it said she believed she could but she couldn't because she didn't have access to affordable childcare. Not having access to high quality childcare does limit the potential of us all within society, and in particular women. So it's important that you do recognise and value the importance of your work. The other thing that that comes up in the literature as supporting well-being is the dedication of early childhood educators to particular communities. Okay, and I see this all the time. It's why I love working in this sector. So even just this week, I've done a lot of work, and I still do a lot of work within Ballymun. The dedication of early childhood educators in Ballymun to that community and to the children is astounding. And what research tells us is that their love for those communities, and often underserved communities or seldom heard voices, supports their well-being. I don't know how it works, but Susan Irvine seems to believe in it. So we know that there's evidence for that. Work with complex communities, but it doesn't have to be about seldom heard voices. I see things and hear stories all the time about early childhood educators who take their values and they run with it. I'm looking this week at Joan O'Sullivan, who's gone over, and lots of you have contributed to that fund or that GoFundMe, who's taken a van with all of the donations from the sector, her and Brian, and they're now on the border with Ukraine. I saw another example, like I don't really know Eilish Balf, and I hope I said her name right. In the pandemic, she had the daughter of a nurse in her service, and she kept that child and childminded her throughout the pandemic to afford the money to go to work. Remarkable things happen every day in our sector that highlights dedication that we have to children. And they're just a couple of examples. And we know that those levels of dedication, we're getting something back. We also know that our well-being comes from this idea of fulfilling our potential and searching for meaning, and the preponderance, so that there is much more positive emotion in our days than there is negative. Okay, so we do see within early childhood, when our days are filled with positives, when we can see the magic moments, the ordinary magic that happens within early childhood settings, we know that that supports our individual well-being. And sometimes it's reminding ourselves just to see it, if that makes sense. But we know that that supports us. And then a big thing that's coming up, and I want you to think individually about this in your own workplace. Do you feel independent? Do you feel that self-efficacy? I am good at my job. Because that's really, really important. And it's not just about you feeling it, it's about other people validating that for you. And it's not just about your line manager, it's about you saying to your colleague in the room, you're doing a great job. These are all of things that we know supports our well-being within early childhood. If we ever get stuck, we can think about the fact that early childhood educators are like, I like to call them brain surgeons without the need for surgery. You completely alter the makeup of and the development of children's brains just by loving them and talking to them and caring for them. That's really powerful work. And then there was another piece. I love an old podcast, as does Sharon Byrne. I must check in with her because I'm running out at the minute. But Breathwork Brown had a piece on recently, and it talked about values. Values are really important for our well-being. And there's this big list. The link is there. And you can only pick two. But in the process of picking two, I suppose you think about what's important to you. And I think if we look at our values and we look at the Menti afterwards, we're going to see values about love, about patience, about authenticity, about giving, of contribution. And they are all exceedingly important traits that should be recognised and valued within society. So I hope I'm making you all feel just a wee tiny bit better about yourselves, because you are awesome. I don't have examples from all of you, but I'm sure if I spent long enough, I could find those times when you have offered incredible moments to children and their families. So we've thought about, within our bioecological model, we've thought about ourselves. Now I want to think about the relationships that we have with others, because what the research tells us, research in early childhood education is telling us, is that relationships in our workplace are critical. Okay, that includes our relationships with the children, okay, with our colleagues that we work with, and then the wider community that we're part of, okay? So in particular, relationships with children, we do know that they can be fractured or threatened by challenging behavior. And if you want to know what enhances your relationship with children, well, we do know this. I have a real draw at the minute for the work of Robert Pianta. And so the things that he talks about that are really important for relationships are high levels of warmth. Okay, so kindness, warmth, responsiveness, low levels of conflict. You don't need to be the boss with children. You are more powerful than them. Okay, because you're like 4 times their size and you're a grown up, you can drive and stuff. You are more powerful. You know, we don't need to establish that. So really reducing that conflict back down. And then beginning to think about appropriate levels of dependency. So children shouldn't be fully dependent on us. We should be supporting their autonomy. But those 3 factors are what really build positive relationships with children. The same can be said for our relationships with colleagues. A lot of that is about kindness, and we'll have a think about some of that literature. And then the wider community is about what is the bigger message that we're sending out to our local communities and our bigger sphere about the importance and the value of our work. Because when we are valued within wider society, not just as a labour activation model, but as educators, as significant influences on children's lives, then we build better relationships with each other, with better well-being, but also we can begin to advocate for what we require at that macro level to filter down to us. We do know that relationships with parents can be a site of difficulty. So Faulkner wrote a good bit about this, and anybody that's ever had that uncomfortable conversation with a parent, or it can even just be a non-verbal, or the mummy or the daddy that doesn't acknowledge you when they drop a child off, that can be extremely depleting and concerning. And sometimes I think, as particularly within private settings, because we are aware that parents are paying so much for that service, we don't pursue that, but I think we should. I think we need to have conversation about how do we allow parents to show us how much they value our work? And are we doing that? And are parents doing that? Okay. And maybe it is about a bit about praise seeking. But if I were a manager of an early childhood setting at the minute, I want to be hearing more positive things than the query or the concern, you know, that like they don't like lamb and you keep serving that on a Thursday. Okay, so I want to create and think about cultures of positive feedback from parents as well as children. In terms of our relationship, we know that working in a team and being part of good teams really promotes well-being for all. And the ways in which we do that, okay, so what Nielsen talks about here is that we need clear roles. I sometimes notice when our students go on placement, they have a wee dip, right? And they'd be in bad form for a couple of weeks. And it's because they don't know what they're meant to be doing, okay? Now, they probably just didn't read the placement handbook. I hope Ashton Silk's not here. They probably didn't read the placement handbook because they were told what they should be doing. But I noticed that when people are unsure of themselves and they don't know what they're meant to be at, that their well-being takes a dip. So having really clear roles within a setting improves and supports our well-being. And I think we need to think about that when we welcome new staff into our services. We also have to have a shared philosophy. So one of the things that's really interesting to me, I mentioned I'm involved in settings in Ballymun. I'm the chairperson of quite a large community-based preschool there. And we're not experiencing the same levels of attrition as other settings and services, okay? And now I know part of that is that we don't necessarily have the same overheads, but our setting only receives the DCY, or it's not the DCY anymore, we only receive money from the department. We don't get extra funding. So we run like a lot of services do. And one of the reasons I think why we haven't lost staff is that there is a real shared philosophy in a lot of the work that we do. So there is a shared philosophy in how we see and understand children and families. And actually, I feel good when I leave that setting, and it's about that vibe of positivity, of the importance of relationships, relational pedagogies, slow, love, affection, and the ongoing celebration of success within that service. And that's just one example. And it's not to boast about them, because I boast about them all the time. It's because I know it. Okay, I know that setting, and they work well as a team, but there is something about that shared identity. And how do we achieve that in larger services, or when we have multiples? And lots of them do, and they do it really well, but it's just a point to note because we know it's important. Now, the other thing, toxic norms. Love it. Toxic. Okay, it's about to burst into Brittany. I'll hold myself back. Okay, we can get into habits of toxicity, and they become normal. And what do I mean by that? Well, what we mean is unpleasantness in the workplace, people not communicating with each other, criticism, teasing that is more than just a little bit of banter, insufficient conflict resolution. We've all probably been in those workplaces, and it's about, are there mechanisms to resolve it? Sometimes I do say to the students, particularly when they're graduating, you know, there's that Winston Churchill quote, like, never give up. I was like, he's wrong. Sometimes it's just not working out. Give up. Give up. If you're in a space where there is toxicity and it is the norm, you can leave that, because it is very, very hard for one individual to change a culture. If you're a leader and you recognize some of that criticism, that teasing, those insults, there is a conversation that you need to have and think about having in terms of reducing hostility and enhancing much more collegiate interaction, the roles, the philosophy, the success, and how do you do that, okay? And I don't know that One for All vouchers cut it. There's something much more about getting together and working out our values, our space, our beliefs together. That's not me. I put in that McKenna quote. That's not me that wrote about that. Wish it was. Need to get some space to get some writing done. But Reid and McKenna, they talk about the importance of harmonious interpersonal relationships. And what do they mean by that? Do you know what they mean? Kindness, asking how you are. I'm really lucky. I work with some really kind people. And one of my colleagues, she'll say to you, how are you? And you'll say, I'm grand. And she'll say, no, how are you really? And there are those small kindness that make us feel better. Another one of my colleagues, she always says fruit in a room. So it's wonderful. It's a kindness. It's a space that actually when you go in, there's always be something that you can have. Okay. So I'm just wondering, are any of you thinking about opportunities for greater kindness, for greater collegiality? Is that even a word? I think it is, within your settings and within your spaces. And is there a way in which we can shift our language to providing more positive insights for those that we work with? The other thing, I suppose, just in terms of the relationships with children and colleagues and wider communities, and this kind of brings me on to the piece about structures. This study from Irvine, again, it was Australian, love does not conquer all. It's not enough to just love the children and love your job. You actually need that whole ecosystem, okay, that whole systems model to work together. So while it's really important, the love of our job does not conquer all, and we need other people to be kind, we need to value our work, but we need to feel valued within the system. And as I was preparing for today, it's funny, I only kind of agreed to do this session because I was actually working on a piece about inclusion, and loads of the literature that I was searching, inclusion of children with special needs in early childhood, lovely paper actually that we're working on, and it talks about the spaces in which children are welcomed, but loads of the literature was about early childhood educators. So when Sharon rang me, it was like one of those weird little serendipitous things. But as I was looking at this work, I came across this like gorgeous study in a hospital. But actually, it made me think about early childhood educators. So this comes from Frobel, as I'm told it's pronounced, I've been saying Frebel for years. Apparently it's Frobel. Okay. So anyways, it comes from Frobel, and you'll know he was all about songs. Jenny was giving off some lovely Frobel vibes there. He was about songs. He was about movement, games and exercises to use our full senses, our limbs and our bodies. And then the theory talks about how that makes us feel better. And I read about this project that it was called the Singing Medicine, right? And it was where people went in and sang to sick children. I know, seriously, my eyes are watering, okay, thinking about it, not in a cringe way, because it's so moving. So they would go in and they would sing to the children in ICU, and they would, not just ICU, children in hospital that were sick, and they would talk to the nurses and the staff, and they would talk to their parents about their ages and their stages of development, and then they would adjust their songs in and around that. And then what they would do is they would sing to the children in this way, thinking about who the children were, and that was their gift to them, was that mother song, right? And then when they left, or when they finished the song, they would leave like a wee purple sticker on the bed, and it became like a sense of pride, or almost like a marker, like we were here and we gave you our love. And it actually made me think about all of the kindness that happens every day in early childhood settings, and all of the little love stickers that would be left if we did that. I don't know, maybe it's too much, but it made me think about it. And I actually did a piece of work for a setting in Ballymun, surprise. And one of the things that I asked educators to do, and you might want to do it, because I'll read you out just a couple of them now, because I've got 11 minutes left on my Pomodoro. I'm monitoring time here, Sharon. So I asked them to think about a strength that they had. No, I didn't. I asked them to do it for a colleague. I said, people are terrible at doing this about themselves, so I want you to do it for one another. And they wrote out, I don't know, can you see me? So there were loads of these wee cards. I really am going to return these, just FYI. I'm making them into a display board for the setting. That's why I still have them. So they did out these little cards, and on the back of them, they wrote messages, but they weren't to specific people. They were generic. So they held someone in mind, but they didn't write their name. So actually the card could have been for any of them. And they wrote things like, you are, which I know applies to all of you here. You are compassionate and loving and caring towards children and their parents. You are such a good listener, and you always work well within the team. You are always there when I need you. You always speak without judgment, and you never place blame on others. And there were literally hundreds of these amazing little cards. I bought these actually in Tiger. These wee cards, and they put them all in a bag of love, and they were there. And actually it was a really powerful exercise, even as an onlooker, to see the value that they placed on one another. And I know that they're not the only setting that's engaged in that type of activity, but it is a way of building those kindnesses, of recognizing it, of leaving the little purple stickers, right? I'm not suggesting you start singing at each other. That would just be a little bit strange, okay? And we're only just unmasked, so we have to be careful. Okay, so the last piece is really beginning to think about supportive structures. And this is not just for managers, because you're all leaders. You should be leading up and sideways and downways and all sorts of ways. But it is about the structures within which we work. And what we know is that happy workplaces have leadership and mentoring. So people take each other under their wing. They lead them. People know what they're going to do. They lead by example. They share ideas. They go to trainings at 7 o'clock on Thursdays, and 9 o'clock on Saturdays. They show leadership by doing. There is also a piece that we need to work on. We do know that supportive work environments have diversity, okay? And that's a real challenge for us. So thinking about how do we recruit, you know, in terms of gender, in terms of culture, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race, how do we ensure that the children that attend our services are represented in the staff that we have, okay? And that is part of being, of our well-being. How do you lead and ensure that we have a sense of professional identity, that we're not always being assessed, evaluated, quality assured, trained, inspected? How do you say to people, you are doing great today and every day? You are good at your job. You are competent. I love that interaction. Your play experiences there were outstanding. Are we saying that to one another? There's another piece, and this was really interesting. I suppose in the current context, there is a lot of movement in the sector. Transitions into and out of settings significantly impact on the well-being of those that work there. So not only the transitions of new people coming in, but Cassidy looked at when people leave, the way in which they are treated, the way in which the remaining staff are supported with the loss of experience, with the loss of skills, and then the welcome for the new piece. And that was a really interesting article, because I'm hearing a lot about recruitment, about movement within the sector. And then finally, there's a piece just about the physical environment and the space that we're working in. You know, tripping over HEPA filters flat out. Is that impacting on our well-being within the workplace? A couple of lovely examples. This was a nice one. It's a couple of years ago now, but Tiernan Oak down in Athy, they did a piece of work, Kathleen Cash there, where they actually created like a learning story or a portfolio that focused on staff well-being. So rather than focusing on children's agency and participation, they worked on a project about a supportive work environment. They kept reflective journals. They talked to one another. They looked at opportunities for mentoring and exploring each other's experience within the workplace. It was really powerful. I'd talk about it more if I had time, but I don't. I'm going to leave you with Anne Maston, who I love. I love her for a couple of reasons. Do you know what one of them is? She is a doppelganger for my Auntie Sharon, right? I was going to actually like show you a picture of my Auntie Sharon, and then I thought this is just a weird digression, Grainne, right? But she looks identical to her. But also, she's incredible. She has a book called Ordinary Magic, which Sharon's reading at the minute. But she talks about the ordinary magic of that occurs within education. Now, I came to know her work whenever I was working on the homeless study, looking at the experiences of children living in homeless accommodation, and there was magic happening in early childhood settings. That's what brought me to Anne Maston. What early childhood educators were doing was nothing short of magic in their kindness, in their support, and their generosity. And anyway, it brought me to her work because I was thinking, how do I explain how awesome early childhood educators are? And she kind of had thought about that before. And she said that ordinary magic happens for children. But I think this applies to us as well as educators, because children are in the right environments. And I don't just mean like you've got a nice fancy setting. I mean psychologically safe environments. And they have the right relationships. Okay, so with their peers, with one another, with outside agencies. And here's the thing, they are given chances to explore the world around them. And I think I would want that for you as early childhood educators as well. I know I want that for our students, okay? My students, listen to your one, my students, but for our students, I want them to be in the right environments and have the right relationships, but also to be given chances. And that idea of giving chances to others is maybe something I'd like to leave with you, to think about how you give yourself a chance in terms of your well-being, and then how do you give that affordance to others. So I am going to love you and leave you with that. And thanks for all your contributions. And I'll maybe share them into Sharon, and you can send that on afterwards. Okay, bye everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Grainne. I mean, it's so encouraging not just to hear about the challenges and the risk factors, but also to hear about the positive and the magic and the importance of celebrating that. It's really inspiring. So thank you so much for that. We're going to just move on to our final speaker today. Amy Dowd is the manager of Coombree Childcare Centre, and she's been there for 14 years, and she's going to share some of her experiences of promoting wellbeing with her team. So I'll hand you over now to Amy.
Hi, you can hear me? Yeah, lovely. I think everybody can agree, Grainne, that was an amazing presentation. So thank you so much for sharing all that information. Thank goodness that this is going to be shared on the website, because, you know, I'm trying to write stuff down as you're talking, and I know I've missed loads of stuff, but there's amazing information in there. So, and it really does validate all the work that everybody does in the early years. And we don't hear it enough, I don't think. So it's really important. And this whole webinar is really important. So thank you, Grainne. And Sharon, definitely when you were reading, going over your presentation, I could recognize all the signs of stress and everything that was all the warning signs, and it's important to recognize those things. So it was so important to kind of almost validate your own feelings of stress, and, you know, the best way to kind of work through it. And Jenny's relaxation was a brave thing. I could almost use it 5 minutes ago, but I will do my best. So please bear with me. I really want to thank Barnardos for inviting me to this webinar. So I'm here to talk about promoting positive mental health realistically in a service. And the first thing I want to do is I want to give you a bit of information about myself. Most of you can tell you that I'm not originally from here, although my mom tells me that I have an Irish accent now. But in my former life, before I got married, I worked in group homes for adults and children who used to live in state-run institutions due to intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we would transition them into the community. Through that, I learned how to work with a large range of people and under various different situations and huge amount of stress and stressful situations. So, and I did a lot of management in that field for about 10 years before I moved to Ireland. So, you know, being in a caring profession has always kind of been something that I've been interested in, and management has always been kind of in my background. So, that is me. So I left America about 18 years ago, and I married an Irish farmer and moved to rural Roscommon. So it was a huge change culturally for me. And about, you know, I think it's going to actually be my anniversary is on the 14th of March. That'll make it a full, you know, the 15 years. I accepted a management job at Coombridge Childcare Centre. So while I didn't have a background in the early years, I think a lot of the skills were very transferable. And, you know, it was definitely a baptism of fire of getting used to the Irish culture, and not just Irish culture, but the rural Irish culture. It's very different from what I was used to, and I made mountains of mistakes, you know, but it's all those mistakes that have kind of led me to where I am now, because everything you do just kind of helps you along the way. And one thing I just wanted to mention, and why is positive mental health so important, especially in the workplace? I think it's very easy to recognize, you know, Sharon talked about all the stress that we go through every day with COVID, and some of the situations that we've been in over the past 2 years, and even just the mere fact that there's such a staffing crisis, and it's really hard to get people to apply for jobs and to stay in the sector. We're all fighting our own battles, and, you know, some of us are very good at hiding the stress and the strains of the job, but you know, we do our best to kind of push through. And, you know, some of the things that were said today, you know, we're just trying to, you know, sure, we're grand. You know, how was the past, you know, 2 years in the sector? You know, like Grainne said, we're grand. So, but we weren't grand. We were stressed. We were you know, really struggling at times. And similar to what Sharon said, I've never seen so many issues with mental health within my service and throughout the sector as I had over the past 2 years. And, you know, so many people, including myself, have struggled in trying to keep, you know, a positive outlook on things. And really, you know, it's you have to try to find ways to kind of get up in the morning to keep going. And one of the first things that is really important is, you know, making sure that my own mental health has been is in check. One of the, if my mental health isn't doing okay, then I'm not going to be able to handle those very difficult, situations that are going to be in, whether it's, a situation with the parent who's bringing in a sick child when they probably shouldn't, or if it's, dealing with the staff who is incredibly stressed out, if they're reacting, they're reacting really difficult and they're having a hard time with coping. If I start acting, like I've kind of lost the plot and I'm super stressed, setting the tone, keeping that level head, those things are all really important for me to make sure that I'm good. And I need to know how to do that. So, you don't know, it's not a switch that kind of is flipped on. You have to get to know yourself, know what you like. You also have to have hobbies and do things outside of work. I love cooking. I love eating. And I'm also a very, very, very amateur beekeeper. So those things really kind of keep me going. They give me something to focus on outside of work. Because as we know, work can kind of all consume everything that we do every day. So it's really difficult to shut off sometimes, especially if you work in a community service. You might have parents kind of contacting you at all times of the day. I hear stories from people all the time. The parents are calling me at 8:30, wondering if their child can come in, if this is happening, or, and we have to learn to cut off for our own sanity. It's, if we're not kind of in check with ourselves and our own mental health, then we won't be able to help anybody else. And then that in turn is going to directly affect the kids. And that is 100% what it's all about. It's about making sure that the children that we help look after, help care for, the education that we provide for them, it's about making sure that they're in a safe environment, that they're learning all the things that they need to, because so many of them have lost out so much over the past 2 years. And I think we can all say we've seen transitions, really become a big struggle for some of them. One very simple thing, and now I do want to say that I am certainly by no means an expert, and I'm honored to be asked to talk about this, but I'm not an expert in mental health, and I don't pretend to be. But these are just some things that, over the years that we try to work on to kind of boost morale at the service. Every morning, I come into work. I'm usually there around 8 o'clock, and there's a couple other people there at 8 o'clock in the morning as well. And before I turn on the computer, before I do anything, I go around and I say hi to everybody. I think Grainne, you mentioned something like that. Just how are you doing? How are things going? How was your daughter's Irish dancing competition? How was the farm? Talk about common things in common. Maybe there's somebody in their family that is, a little sick. Cancer has, always been a problem in everybody's lives, so really you want to make sure you're checking in, making sure they're good. And for those that come in a little bit later, I make sure I pop in at a time where I know that they're going to be available to kind of say a few words to me. I don't pop in. I try not to pop in the middle of small group time when I know that they're absolutely consumed with what the children are doing and interacting with the kids. But I still want to go in and say, how are things going? Is it one of those crazy days? Is it one of the, when the moon is full and bright overhead, even though we can't see it, things are always going that little bit crazier when that happens? Or is it a really good day? Is everything going to plan? And it's really easy as a manager to sit in your office and to get bogged down by work. And, I remember for a short amount of time, I felt like I had to just get everything done all the time. But you know what? All that can wait. Checking in with everybody is so important, and opening those lines of communication. It really just means that, if it gives somebody an opportunity to say, listen, I might talk to you later, if that's okay. And I have people doing that all the time, because there's always something going on somewhere, whether it be an issue with a child or another staff member or with a parent, or just something outside of work that they might need help with. If I hide away in my office all day long, those opportunities are lost. So it's really good to get out there and talk to everybody and touch base. And I think everybody can agree, the past 2 years have been an absolute roller coaster of emotion and stress. the amount of struggle that I've seen is phenomenal. Something as simple as a teacher calling out sick due to COVID symptoms can literally set some people off to like absolutely ruin their day, and it's something that, 2 or 3 years ago, that wouldn't have been a big deal. Sure, we'll get on fine, but it just, the little things have become super big all of a sudden. And this is 100% down to COVID. And, we need to make sure that we're there to, keep everybody in check. And, sometimes staff will think that, it's only their classroom that's really struggling at the moment, because everybody else seems like they're doing great. And, you can't go around due to confidentiality reasons and say, you know what, they're struggling just as much as you are. This is what's happening over there. But, it's important that everybody feels valued, that they have enough opportunity to have that chance to chat with you. So in order to combat all of that stress over the last 2 years, one very simple way of making sure that, or at least of lessening the stress a little bit, is making sure that they have all the equipment that they need for their classroom. And it's something really simple, and unfortunately, as a community service, childcare service, we haven't always been in a position that we can buy lots of equipment that we would like to have or needed even sometimes. We have definitely struggled financially, and there just never seemed to be enough money. But with the government supports that have been put in place for the past 2 years, that really has lightened the load. I can, ask people, what do you want? What do you think you really need? We've gotten some amazing equipment, and it's really made a difference because the kids are engaged, the staff feel valued, because what they were looking for is, it's of benefit to the kids, and it's what they want. It's their input as well. It's not me buying a whole bunch of stuff thinking that this is what they want, this is what they're going to have. But I have to get, the staff, the teachers have to tell me, what is it that, you want? And I get what they want. I don't assume that this is what they need, because they're in the classroom every day. And lots of times it can also be something as simple as adult-sized chairs in a classroom. If you're in a toddler room, it's really, really hard to sit in a little toddler-sized chair all day long. So having a regular-sized chair is something that will just help with your back support and everything else. And you kind of feel recognized and valued just by making sure that there's something there for you to sit on. And of course, all the other kids are going to want to sit on that because that's the teacher's chair, but that's another situation to handle. But your environment, making sure that it is well stocked and to the teacher, to the way they want it, because it's their classroom. Another simple thing that I do is I try to take away some of the stress of the parent issues. On occasion, there might be some issues that come up with parents, and sometimes the teachers aren't just in the right frame of mind to deal with it. So, or sometimes they feel like they've tried and tried and tried and nothing has worked. So, sometimes, unfortunately, I can be perceived as the principal of the school, the mean one, might say is final, but, I really have to back up my staff, and I need to support them and, follow the policies, because that's what they're there for. They're there to support the staff, which also ensures the safety and the well-being of the children. So I make sure that the staff know that if there's any issues and they want me to handle it, that I will always be there for them. Another very simple thing that I do, and I insist on this really, is I make sure that all the staff get a break, and that's a break away from the kids. I hear stories of people, these poor people, these teachers that are sitting in their classrooms and they're eating snack with the kids, or they're having a lunch. And it's always good to sit and encourage children to eat, because they'll eat more things. Obviously, we know this, if they see, a role model, eating the broccoli, eating this, but, you need that time away from the kids just to kind of step back, take a breath, get a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee. It's not just the people who have the legal requirement, after 4.5 hours, they get a 15-minute break somewhere. And if you work 6 hours, you get 30 minutes. But really, it's just about, getting that time to just unwind for a few minutes. Our full-time staff, they usually work about 7.5 hours a day. So that really works out to be about 4 hours in the morning and 3.5 hours in the afternoon, or vice versa. And technically, they're not entitled to a break. But, like, our jobs are hard, especially with the past 2 years. We need our breaks away from the kids, and everybody deserves that. So I make sure that everybody has that break at least once, and then they get a good hour lunch break. And even what we do for people who work for 5 hours or 5.5 hours is we give them 20-minute break, because it's a really long time. And some of those, teachers, they're working, through 2 different meals, possibly, especially if they're in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're usually there past lunch. So they need time to have something to eat, to feel relaxed, because I will tell you one thing, if I'm hungry, I am not in a good mood. So I have to eat. So I put huge, huge importance on the value of making sure that you are fed and watered every day. Sorry, my dog is making sure that that I don't forget that she's there. So I apologize for her. She's been trying to behave, but it never works. So a few things that we did, and some of these things did cost money, but it doesn't have to be very expensive, but it is worth it. I try to get something nice for their staff breaks. It could be something as simple as just the scones from the local restaurant, just have it there for them, maybe once every couple of weeks, get them something. I am a stickler for a healthy eating policy, so I try not to make it about sweets and treats and sugar and stuff like that, but I try to keep it as healthy as possible. And then also we've bought lunch for the staff on numerous occasions, soup and sandwiches from the local restaurant, just to say, do you know what, enjoy this. This past Christmas, I did something different as well. In late November, I bought some advent calendars from an online pharmacy, and I was able to get a whole bunch of them. And they're all about the lotions and the smelling things and things that you wouldn't normally buy yourself, but in an advent calendar, it was just a special treat. So everybody we had a schedule of the 31 days, and or actually it's 24, and everybody had a chance. So because there were several of them, we all had a chance to get a couple of things at least every week. And, everybody was absolutely thrilled. It brought that sense of, Christmas early, and it made it last the whole month long. So that is definitely something that I'm going to be trying next year. And now that the COVID restrictions have ended, we've also started up staff night outs. So about once a month, we invite everybody to come out to dinner. It doesn't always suit everybody, and not everybody always wants to go either. But we do make sure that everybody is invited, because it is really important that everybody feels included, everybody is welcome. This also includes our students. We have a few students that work with us at the moment, and we actually just had a staff night out last weekend, and one of our students came, so it was fantastic, and it's building that rapport. Everybody's guard is down, and we just had a really nice time. And you learn stuff about people that you wouldn't normally at work, because you just don't have that time to talk. So it's a fantastic thing to do. We also let's see, when it comes to the treats, one thing that I do is make sure you keep in mind those people who have food allergies. I would be one of them, and there's also 1 or 2 more others within the service, and it's really nice to make sure that they have something to eat there as well when that goes, because it's really nice that everybody gets to eat something nice, but it's when somebody's usually left out of all the festivities because it's only one person, it goes a long way when there's something for the diabetic, or something for the person who's allergic to dairy. Let's see, there's when I'm dealing with staff, and there's always going to be situations where they need to be called out. I always like to make sure that they know that if there's ever anything that they need, if there's something wrong, they need, their child is out sick, or, they need to do something, when it comes to family, they have to make sure that their family is priority. We are work, and although, we will survive, without them, but they need to know that if they need something, if they need that bit of support, that they will always be there. That they, 99.9% of the time, I make sure if they need something for their child or their husband or their mom or their dad, they go. That has to be, they have to know that that is going to be the case, because you can get really worked up and stressed out if you're feeling like your parents really, really need you and you're not there to support them. And one of the last things I want to talk about is support and supervision. I do my best to get all the support and supervision done with everybody, but lots of the times it might not be feasible. But if you get to know your staff and you're talking to them every day, you can find out when they're upset or feeling overwhelmed or fed up. And I will drop everything I'm doing just to talk to a staff if they feel like they're struggling. It might take 10 minutes or it might take an hour. And you have to recognize that sometimes that staff person might need to just go home for the day for whatever reason, whether it be work related or unwork related. And sometimes they might need to take some time off as well. And that's something that we've definitely experienced over the past year or two, and it really should be encouraged and really supported, because it's really hard to recognize that, you're struggling with something and you need some time off. And always what they say to me, but what about the staff coverage? Because, as we know, it's so hard to get staff and to fill in those holes when one person is out. Make sure it's not their concern. That's for me to worry about. They need to worry about themselves. They need to make sure that they're looking after themselves. So I need them to know that their well-being is what's important, because like I said earlier, if their well-being is in a good place, it's going to have an effect on the children, and we definitely don't want that. It's really important that they know that. Just so you know, there are 21 staff that I manage, like I said, and there's a few work experience students, and hopefully that this will. I've mentioned some things that are going to help you, but I will tell you this, that I wouldn't be able to do any of these things without the support of my voluntary management committee. They have been behind me for the longest time. They are absolutely 100% behind everything that I do and my decisions that I make. And it makes my job so much easier knowing that I have that support. So whether you work for a private provider or a community place, having that support, knowing that is there, just makes it that much easier. So, I really want to thank you again for everything, and I hope you enjoyed.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amy. It's really fabulous to hear the things that you've put in place, and I think you'll probably have a few people maybe applying for jobs in your service now after that. Just before we go, I just want to highlight a few things that we have put in place, supports around wellbeing before we go here. So I'm just going to share some information here. Whoops. Now, can you see that? Yeah, okay. So the first thing that we've done is we've developed a few specific support resources on wellbeing. And if you go to our website, barnardos.ie, in the learning and development section, and I should actually just mention that we will be sending an email out to you with all of these links in it, so you don't have to frantically write them all down. We have a tip sheet that touches on a few of the things that Grainne mentioned earlier about how relationships within the team, the management and the environment can all go a long way to support well-being. So you might find some useful information in there. We also have a checklist poster that you can maybe print out and put up in your staff rooms that just have a few things that you can have a look at before you go home at the end of the day that might help you leave the work stresses behind. And Colin in our library has developed a set of reading resources, so you'll find them all in the learning and development section on our website. You'd also find some information about some training events that are kind of relevant to staff wellbeing. As Amy mentioned, we do run training events on supervision, and Sharon also does a couple of events on the impact of trauma and on behaviour that can go a long way to kind of building up, we all know CPD can build up your confidence in your daily practice. There's also on the learning development section, in that training section, you'll find information about some free e-learning courses that we have, and you can sign up to them there. And that's where we'd be putting up the recording of the webinar today. If you go over to our shop, we have a lot of free publications to support people working in school age care and in early learning and care. Most of them are free. We do sell some, and if you want to buy some today, there's a discount code for all our attendees, which is AINTUS20, and that will get you 20% off until the end of the month. We also have a special membership rate for those working in early learning care and school age care who want to sign up to our library and information service. So you can find all the details there. That's a couple of publications that we have that we're launching in the next few weeks. And if you keep an eye, either whether you're a member of our Facebook group, the Early Years Learning and Development Facebook Barnardos group, or on our Twitter accounts, we're running an event on the 7th of April on trauma in young children that you might be interested in. And I'll just leave those links up there for a second, and I will stop sharing now because we'll be sending those out to you anyway. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for attending today, and particular thanks to our presenters, Sharon, Amy, and Grainne, and to Jenny for the great activity. And I hope you all find something useful there. And thanks all for your comments in the chat as well. We'll have a read of them now. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.